Buenos días, por favor.
Good morning. Please take your seats. We will starting our plenary in a few moments. Please take your seats.
Buenos días a todos. Vamos a iniciar.
Good morning, everyone. We will start our meeting. Those who are not yet seated, please take your seats so that we can start our plenary meeting.
En primer lugar,
First of all, we'd like to thank everyone for the enormous amount of work that's been carried out over 8 days of meetings. We are now 2 days from the end, and we're very pleased with the productive work, the teamwork from all the countries here present. And we truly hope that you've been enjoying being here in our country in Panama, and that your stay in our country is enjoyable. And I hope we will continue with our teamwork until we finish all our work tomorrow, that we continue to be productive for the good of planet Earth. The world awaits the conclusions that we are reaching, and that is a major responsibility for each and every one of us. We will start with the first item on our agenda, which is the adoption of the summary record of the first plenary session of the 14th of November 2022. I call on the conference to approve the summary record of the first plenary, which is a CoP19 Plen Rec 1. I open the floor to parties so that we can adopt it, but if any comments, if there are any comments, the floor is open. I give the floor to the European Union.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to add a sentence to the second paragraph of agenda item 4.1. The paragraph that currently starts, the United States of America, the European Union and Israel supported the amendments and so on. We want to add a first sentence to that paragraph that would read as follows. The European Union noted the European Union and its member states would participate in the meeting as usual. Open brackets, referring to meetings of the Conference of the Parties since CoP17, close brackets. Stop, and then the paragraph as it stands now will continue. The United States of America, the European Union, and so on. I can repeat if necessary. Thank you, Chair.
Por favor, repita nuevamente la propuesta.
Could you please repeat the proposal once more?
So the sentence would read, the European Union noted the European Union and its member states would participate in the meeting as usual, open brackets, referring to meetings of the Conference of the Parties since CoP17, close brackets, and stop. Thank you, Chair.
Gracias, Unión Europea.
I thank the European Union. Would anyone else like to take the floor? Would anyone else have a comment on this item?
No habiendo más comentarios,
If there are no further comments, we document with the observation from the European Union.
tiene la palabra la República.
I give the floor to the Democratic Republic of Congo. Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. I was a little lost because normally we have up on the boards, on the screens, the agenda item. I wonder if they could be put up on the screens, the number of the item that we are covering. Thank you.
Sí, tomamos nota y le pedimos.
Yes, we take note and we'll ask the technicians to please put the agenda item on the screens as we progress.
Continuamos, ya está en la pantalla.
We'll continue. The request that was made has now been shown on the screen. The next item is the reports and recommendations of the committees. And we call on the chair of the Standing Committee to provide their report. Thank you.
Tiene la palabra Canadá, presidente del Comité Permanente.
I now give the floor to Canada, Chair of the Standing Committee.
Thank you, Chair. I'm presenting this report in my role as the representative of Canada, Chair of the Standing Committee. Canada has served as chair for the past 2 intersessional periods, and what a trip it's been. I want to give a quick thank you to all the members, parties, observers, as well as the Secretariat for their support over that period. The period between COP18 and COP19 has been marked with, again, an increasing workload and numerous pressures on the committee and participants, which is evidenced in the 25-page report before you. And of course, the COVID-related disruptions were deeply felt. In the period, the committee met both virtually for the first time and face-to-face in Lyon, thanks to the generous support of France. I am particularly grateful to France as their hosting allowed for regular evening sessions to be added to the 74th meeting's program of work, a precedent that I sadly fear will need to continue. But what was this work? I draw your attention to paragraphs 7 through 9, where the activities I undertook pursuant to the MOU with UNEP are described. Paragraphs 10 through 18 describe activities of the committee that were not reported elsewhere during this Conference of the Parties, pursuant to the various resolutions containing direction to the committee. Paragraphs 19 through 30 further describe activities of the committee not reported elsewhere, pursuant to a number of decisions. Of these, I would direct your attention to paragraph 20, 24, and 25, where the committee proposes renewal of some decisions not fully implemented in the past intersessional period. Additionally, paragraph 27 notes that the committee agreed to submit a decision to provide a process to consider the need for a mechanism to allow the rapid movement of diagnostic samples. The report then details other matters that were considered by the committee as brought to our attention by parties, the Secretariat, or the scientific committees in line with the Standing Committee's terms of reference. These are found in paragraphs 31 through 37. You are all invited to read my additional reflections and concluding remarks in paragraph 38 and 39. To sum these up, the work this interstitial period was challenging, our adaptability and flexibility was tested, but I feel the committee rose to these challenges with a great deal of support and collaboration from a large number of people committed to this convention. Chair, I invite the Conference of the Parties to take note of the present document and to delete decisions 18.3, 18.27, 18.52 through 18.54, 18.171, 18.266 through 18.269, and 16.136 Rev Cop 18 to 16.138 Rev Cop 18, because these decisions have been implemented as reported in the document. I invite the Conference of the Parties to renew the decision on the conduct of committees found in Annex 3 to the present document, to adopt the revised decisions on implications of the transfer of a species from one appendix to another, and the revised decision on stocks and stockpiles found in Annex 4 to the present document, to adopt the decision on simplified procedures and the decision on higher taxon listings found in Annex 5 to the present document, and to note the recommendations related to precious corals in Annex 6 of the present document. Thank you, Chair.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair of the Standing Committee, for your report. I now invite parties to make any comments.
Tiene la palabra el
I give the floor to the representative of the United States of America.
Thank you, Chair. The United States thanks the Chair for this report and her leadership during this unprecedented intersessional period. We take note of her observations regarding the increasing workload of the Standing Committee. We support the recommendations in the document. We also support the recommendations of the Secretariat regarding the simplified procedures detailed in paragraph 22 of Resolution COP 12.3 on permits and certificates and the scientific exchange exemption in Article 7, paragraph 6 in Resolution COP 11.15 on non-commercial loan, donation, or exchange of museum, herbarium, diagnostic, and forensic research specimens. The United States believes that it is important to raise awareness on these provisions, including making information relating to the relevant processes available to the public, providing training to management authorities if required, and reviewing national legislation if appropriate to ensure that simplified procedures and the scientific exchange exemption have been duly incorporated into parties' legal framework. In respect to simplified procedures, the United States would like to call attention to our information document, document CoP19, Inth Doc 18, consideration of additional efficiencies in the movement of musical instruments for non-commercial purposes, and propose to amend draft decision 19.AA in Annex 5 of the document also to consider the non-commercial movement of musical instruments for purposes of performance, display, or competition in the Standing Committee's discussion on development of guidance and capacity building on use of simplified procedures in accordance with the recommendations in Part 8 of Resolution COP 12.3 on permits and certificates. If it's the pleasure of the Chair, I'd like to read our proposed amendment.
Sí, sobre su propuesta.
Yes, United States, on your proposal for a simplified process of what you would like to add, can you please mention specifically what it is that you would like to be adding? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Our amendment is as follows in draft decision 19.AA. After movement of wildlife samples for diagnostic purposes and or conservation purposes, insert the following language. And the non-commercial movement of musical instruments for purposes of performance, display, or competition.
Disculpe, Estados Unidos.
We are very sorry, United States. Can you please repeat it slowly, please? Thank you.
Yes, sir, my apologies. In draft decision 19.AA, after movement of wildlife samples for diagnostic purposes and or conservation purposes, insert the following language. And the non-commercial movement of musical instruments for purposes of performance, display, or competition.
Gracias.
Thank you. United States, we take a note. I now give the floor to Peru.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. The Peruvian delegation would like to show the Amos. Congratulations to Canada for having chaired the Standing Committee in the latest years, and we would like to also congratulate them for their leadership. We would also like to support the management report that has been drafted by Canada and thank the whole group and the GRULA group for our joint work. Once again, the region consolidates its work in this region. Thank you. Thank you, Peru.
Invito a hacer.
I now invite all states that are not party and NGOs to take the floor.
Invito a las organizaciones observadores a hacer.
I now invite all observers to make any comments. No comments? Based on the different interventions, the Conference of the Parties takes note of the report and agrees to remove decisions 18.3, 18.27, 18.52a, 1854, 18.171, 18.266a, 18.269 and 16.136. Rev COP 18A and 16138 Rev COP 18.
D. Adopta la renovación.
Adopts the renewal of the decision on the functioning of committees under Annex 3. C. Adopts the revised decision on the implications of the transfer of a species from one appendix to another, and the revised decision on the stockpile and existing stocks under Annex 4, and adopts the decision on a simplified process as well as the modification submitted by the United States and the decision on the inclusion of superior taxa that is in Annex 5, and E takes note of the recommendations relative to precious corals of the Antifaria order and the Corallidae family under Annex 6.
Basada en las. Con ello culminamos el tema del comité.
We now conclude the Standing Committee item. We would like to thank Canada for having chaired this committee. You have done a fantastic job, so congratulations, Canada, for your chairing of the Standing Committee. We now move on to the Animals Committee. I invite to the chair of the Animals Committee, Mr. Matthias Lotscher, to introduce document CoP19, Doc 9.2.1. Chair, you have the floor.
Honourable Chair, thank you for giving me the floor. This report covers the activities carried out by the Animals Committee between the closure of the 18th meeting of the Conference of Parties in Geneva in 2019 and today. I now have the daunting task to condense the 15 pages of my report into 3 to 5 minutes. I will try, but I may need a little bit more time. The work of the committee was guided by 29 resolutions and 39 decisions decided by the Conference of the Parties. As you certainly are aware of, the COVID-19 pandemic and its disruptive consequences greatly influenced the work of our committee. Instead of being able to have 2 face-to-face meetings, only 1 meeting was held online. This hindered our usual dealings, and for several issues and the Animals Committee has had to renew part of all decisions in order to be able to complete the work in the next intersessional period. These topics include work on pangolins, seahorses, synthetic and cultured DNA, and saiga antelope. Furthermore, for two central processes, the review of significant trade and the review of captive breeding, no new cases could be selected and the corresponding review processes initiated. We also held a joint meeting between the Plants and the Animals Committee, and I would like to thank the PC chair and the member of the Plants Committee for their work together with the Animals Committee. And I will now talk about what we achieved in this meeting, what we did. At the joint meeting of AC 31 and PC 25, the two committees provided their feedback in relation to the strategic vision and endorsed the mapping of the CITES strategic vision 2021 to 2030 objectives against the CITES resolutions and decisions, and made some additions that were viewed essential by the two committees. They also reviewed the reports of the Secretariat on capacity building and provided their comments to SC 74. In relation to the work on review of provisions related to trade in specimens not of wild source, as the analysis is still ongoing, the joint meeting agreed to propose the extension of the relevant decisions to SC 74. As for the ID manual, Animals Committee and Plants Committee formed a working group which in collaboration with the Secretariat prepared text for a new resolution to replace Resolution Conf 1119 Ref COP 16 that was dealt with earlier last week. This draft was reviewed at the joint meeting of Animals Plants Committee, and several decisions were also developed and forwarded to SC 74. In relation to the discussions and possible problems with regard to nomenclatural changes to species listed in Appendix 3, the committees agreed to propose the renewal of decisions 18313 and 18314. As directed under Resolution Conf 18.4 on cooperation with IPES, the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, I participated in several meetings of the MEP, the Multidisciplinary Expert Panel. This matter was also discussed earlier in the first week. In the following, I will concentrate on the issues dealt with by the Animals Committee that are not referred to in other documents submitted to this COP. So on the review of significant trade process for the species country combinations which are still retained in the review process, the Animals Committee provided its analysis on the implementation of its recommendations by the relevant parties to the Standing Committee for its consideration. The Animals Committee also decided to review the Resolution Conf 8.13 on the use of coded microchip implants for marking live animals in trade in the next intersessional period, as an update is clearly needed. In relation to the transport guidelines for non-air transport of CITES-listed animals, the Animals Committee provided its input on a revised version submitted to the Animals Committee by the Secretariat. In relation to sturgeons and paddlefish, the Animals Committee endorsed the study commissioned to WWF and asked parties through a notification to provide information on laboratories capable to perform forensic analysis of caviar to the Secretariat to be published on the website. For precious corals, the Animals Committee analyzed the outcomes of the Precious Coral Survey and the study by FAO and prepared recommendations on actions needed to enhance the conservation and sustainable harvest and use of all precious corals in international trade. On African lions, the Animals Committee provided comments and suggestions on the guidelines for the conservation of the lion in Africa to IUCN and CMS. It further requested IUCN, in collaboration with CITES and CMS secretariats and in consultation with African lion range states, to develop the next version of the guidelines in the context of the joint CITES-CMS African Carnivores Initiative. The Animals Committee further noted the progress made in the development of guidance on the making of non-determined findings for queen conch, noted the activities by Peru and the plurinational state of Bolivia in relation to trade in Titicaca frogs, and encouraged them to continue their collaboration for implementing the binational action plan for the conservation of this species. We also provided guidance in relation to the identification guide on tortoises and freshwater turtles. And finally, we supported the information in the analysis of species under the periodic review process carried out by Mexico and the US. As you have heard, a great deal of work could be achieved under quite difficult conditions. This would not have been possible without the considerable input and work from the dedicated members of the Animals Committee, for which I thank them thoroughly. I also include thanks to the nomenclature specialist for fauna, who also contributed to all of this work. I would like to thank all these people for all their voluntary work that helped us achieve these results. My particular gratitude goes to the Secretariat staff, especially the science team that has tirelessly provided us with an outstanding support, prepared the numerous documents we based our decisions on, and supported our work in any way they could. So in relation to leopard hunting trophies that were dealt with yesterday, the Animals Committee also looked at this issue. However, we were not in a position to make recommendations and therefore proposed two decisions in order for the Animals Committee to review the roadmap at its next meeting at AC 32. These decisions are contained in Annex 2 of this document for approval of the COP. I therefore invite the Conference of the Parties to adopt these decisions in Annex 2 of the document. Thank you, Chair.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, Chair of the Animals Committee. I now invite all parties to make their comments.
Que son partes sobre la intervención.
All parties, you have the floor on the report of the Animals Committee. I give the floor to Israel.
Thank you, Chair. And first of all, we would like to express our thanks to the Chair of the Animals Committee for his hard work over this entire period. It's certainly a very, very daunting task to lead such a committee, and he did it very, very well. We have a comment for two small amendments to Annex 2, Draft Decision 19BB. In the second line, well, I'll read out the whole thing and the small drafting suggestions. The Animals Committee shall review the roadmap for the conservation of the leopard in Africa by IUCN and make recommendations. And we would like to add here to the Standing Committee, comma, as appropriate, concerning the aspects of it that relate to, and we would like to delete the words scientific aspects of the implementation. Just delete scientific aspects of. So it would read, concerning the aspects of it that relate to implementation of CITES. So to leave out the words scientific aspects of. We feel that there are many different aspects here, and having the Animals Committee, although it is a scientific committee, they're well versed in CITES, and they can forward this to the Standing Committee, which will then look at maybe perhaps broader issues on conservation of leopard in Africa related to CITES. Thank you, Chair.
Gracias, Israel.
Thank you, Israel. I give the floor to Japan.
Thank you, Chair. We thank to the ASIC Chair for preparing this document and your great leadership. We support the recommendations in this document and also would like to show our gratitude briefly. It was the first challenge for the committee to work on a lot of tasks without a face-to-face meeting because of the COVID pandemic. Furthermore, the AC has been asked to take up more and more tasks by COP and SC. We highly appreciate that amazing amount of work accomplished by the excellent guidance of the chair and efforts of members of the committee despite of the COVID pandemic circumstances. Thank you, Chair.
Gracias, Japón.
Thank you, Japan. I now invite comments from observer organizations
Y a los estados que no son partes.
and as well comments from non-party states.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Sobre la base de las
Based on all interventions, the Conference of the Parties takes note of the report and adopts the decisions with the amendments made by Israel. Thank you.
Seguidamente tiene la palabra
I now invite the Plans Committee to take the floor, and I invite the chair of the Plans Committee to introduce her document.
Gabón pidió la palabra.
Gabon, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le
Thank you, Chair. As chair of the Plans Committee, I now submit to the Conference of the Parties document CoP19 Doc 9.3.1 Rev 1 with the results of the Plans Committee, results for 2020-2021 for that period, and which is included in Annex 1 of the document. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the CITES Plans Committee only met once intersessionally for the period 2020-2022 and in 2 joint sessions with the Animals Committee. On its 25th session in June 2021, the committee met online with the support of the Secretariat. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge all the support that was given to us by the Secretariat, and I thank them for it. We cover all decisions transferred to the Plans Committee which require an acceptance or approval of the Plans Committee as it's indicated in Annexes 1 and 2 of the document in question. The Plans Committee also decided to create 6 intersessional working groups, the mixed group with the Animals Committee, and amongst the following. The first group, identification of timber and other wood products, rosewood tree species, African tree species, neotropical tree species, trade in medicinal and aromatic plant species, as well as identification materials. The results of these working groups, as well as most of the items discussed on the 25th session of the Plans Committee, were included in the agenda of this session of the Conference of the Parties and are included in the report in detail, but I won't mention them further. I now invite the Conference of the Parties to take into consideration the recommendation made in paragraph 10 on the document CoP19 Doc 9.3.1 Rev 1, which means take note of the report that is therefore included. Chair, before I close my remarks, I would like to thank all the members of the Plans Committee for the work carried out in order to allow to carry out the work program of this committee and as well for their unwavering support for me. I do not forget here to thank very particular the specialist on the plant's nomenclature and all experts who supported us during our work. And I would also like to thank the Animals Committee, their members, and very particularly the chair for the joint decisions that we have made. I would also like to take the opportunity to thank Panama for their very warm welcome, and I thank as well all parties for our very cordial exchanges. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta del Comité.
Thank you very much, Chair of the Plants Committee, for your intervention. I now invite all parties to make comments on this report.
Tiene la palabra.
I give the floor to Portugal.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. It's the first time Portugal takes the floor. I would therefore like to thank the very warm welcome that the Panama government and its people have granted us, as well as the exceptional organization of this meeting, and thank the Secretariat for it. I now move on to English. Thank you.
You again, Mr. Chair. I speak on behalf of the European Union and its member states. We want to note the report from the Chair of the Plants Committee. The European Union has always supported the work of this technical committee and will continue to do it, considering how important it is for the correct and scientific-based implementation of the Convention. We are particularly grateful for the work done under very difficult circumstances during the pandemic period, when the committee only met online. We want to thank the Chair and all the members of the committee for their valuable work, and all parties, organizations, and the Secretariat for their contribution to the functioning of the Plants Committee. To close, and personally speaking, as I leave my seat as a regional member of the Plants Committee, I want to wish all the success to the colleagues that will continue the work in the committee, and to tell you that you can keep counting on me to support your work. Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair.
Muchas gracias.
I thank Portugal, and I now give the floor to the United States of America.
Thank you, Chair. The United States wishes to thank the Chair of the Plants Committee, its members, and the Secretariat for the diligent efforts and progress made in the past intersessional period, despite the extraordinary circumstances presented by the pandemic. We support noting of the report and would ask that the following two items also be noted for the record in relation to Resolution Conf 12.8 on the review of significant trade in specimens of Appendix 2 species and Annex 1 of document CoP19 Doc 9.3.1. As a reminder, while the selection of new species country combinations according to the ordinary process of Resolution Conf 12.8 was postponed until after COP19, the selection of Pterocarpus erinaceus follows the exceptional procedure, and the combinations of countries to enter Step 2 were confirmed. Thank you.
Gracias.
I thank the United States of America. I now open the floor for comments from non-party states, intergovernmental organizations. I invite comments from observer organizations.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Basándonos en las intervenciones,
Based on the interventions, the Conference of the Parties notes with the comments of the United States of America and those on the report of the Plants Committee. We'd like to thank the Plants Committee for their work.
pasamos al punto del Día Mundial de la Vida Silvestre.
And we now move on to the item on the United Nations World Wildlife Day. And I invite the Secretariat to introduce document CoP19 Doc 18.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. It's a pleasure for me to speak to document CoP19 Doc 18 on the United Nations World Wildlife Day. The document briefly describes the celebrations of the World Wildlife Day, the 3rd of March, in the past 3 years by the CITES Secretariat and its partners. The themes of the day have been decided by the Secretariat in consultation with the Chair and the Vice Chair of the Standing Committee. The themes for 2020 and 2021 took into account Decision 18.38 that directed the Standing Committee to consider the theme of livelihoods, indigenous peoples, and rural and local communities as a future theme. Indeed, the theme selected for 2021 was Forests and Livelihoods, Sustaining People and Planet. In 2022, the theme selected was Recovering Key Species for Ecosystem Restoration, to draw attention to the critical role that keystone plant and animal species play in ensuring ecosystem health. The theme was also selected to mark the UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration 2021 to 2031. The celebration of the United Nations World Wildlife Day has successfully been held fully online with direct live participation from all over the world. Over 25,000 people have viewed the event that took place in 2022 on the convention's YouTube channel. The Secretariat would like to thank all parties and partners for their efforts in celebrating World Wildlife Day, and the partners involved in organizing the main event, as well as donors and sponsors, in particular Switzerland. Looking ahead to next year's World Wildlife Day, I'm pleased to say that arrangements are already underway. World Wildlife Day 2023 will be special, as it will mark the 50 years of the adoption of the Convention. Throughout its 50 years of existence, partnerships have been at the heart of CITES, with and within parties, and at the international level with organizations and initiatives. Sustaining existing partnerships and building new ones is critical for the future of life on Earth, and therefore World Wildlife Day 2023 will be celebrated under the theme Partnerships for Wildlife Conservation. The theme will offer a chance for cohesion, for promotion of valuable partnerships and initiatives, and for widespread inclusion. The theme will send a message of hope and be a springboard to the necessary future work that the entire CITES community will be doing to bring us into a different relationship with nature, a partnership with nature. Before I conclude, allow me to recall Resolution 17.1, which inter alia calls upon all parties to use World Wildlife Day as an opportunity to celebrate and raise awareness of the general public regarding the world's wild animals and plants. The resolution also invites all parties, national, international organizations, to associate celebrations of World Wildlife Day to national, regional, international conservation events where appropriate, and to communicate such planned activities to the Secretariat. We very much look forward to celebrating World Wildlife Day 2023 with the entire CITES community in the spirit of the theme. In conclusion, Mr. Chair, the Conference of the Parties is invited to take note of the document and to delete Decision 18.38 as it has been implemented. Chair, this concludes my introduction. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Secretariat, for the report. I now call on parties to make any comments. Singapore, you have the floor.
Chair, Singapore would like to thank the CITES Secretariat for the excellent efforts for World Wildlife Day. Singapore strongly believes in engaging the youth for biodiversity conservation issues. We had a youth delegate with us for the first time at this CITES Conference of Parties, and he was looking forward to sharing his experience organizing a Southeast Asian Regional Youth Symposium on World Wildlife Day earlier this year. Unfortunately, this agenda item was moved back, and he had to leave beautiful Panama to return to school for an examination. With your indulgence, Chair, I would like to represent the youths whom we mentor to share a few words. Yes, thank you, Chair. Like the other celebrations during the pandemic, our World Wildlife Day Regional Youth Symposium was held online. The young team, being tech-savvy as they are, executed the event to great success. Over 200 youth participants from ASEAN nations logged in for a virtual networking lunch, conversing in small groups while eating in front of their computers. The team curated a program with over 20 distinguished speakers spread over 3 thematic tracks to showcase best practices in efforts against illegal wildlife trade, species recovery, and ecosystem restoration in Southeast Asia. They also brought in many biodiversity leaders to facilitate lively and meaningful discussions in smaller groups. My young team had set out to plan an event to inspire the region's youths, but we were pleasantly surprised and encouraged when it was the experts and practitioners who turned out to be the ones who were truly moved and fired up to do good after rubbing off the aspirations, energy, and hope of the youths. The youths are the generation that will inherit what will remain of our natural heritage. We are excited for opportunities to conserve this and to shape their own future. It is their hope that the friendships forged through events like our World Wildlife Day Regional Youth Symposium will pave the way for easier and better regional and international collaborations in the future. They wish for more of such platforms, and they wish to be connected to more opportunities to contribute to projects with meaning and impact such as this. The organizing team has grown from 5 individuals this year to 16 passionate youths who have already started making big plans for an in-person World Wildlife Day 2023. This new team is ambitious and full of energy, especially after meeting Ms. Yvonne Higuero in person 2 months ago during her time in Singapore. So if anyone is interested to partner us, to participate in or to contribute to this meaningful event, we warmly welcome you to reach out. Please join us to engage outstanding youths on World Wildlife Day as we forge partnerships for wildlife conservation. Thank you, Chair.
Invitamos.
We give the floor to non-party states. The floor is open, and for intergovernmental organizations who may wish to comment. And we invite comments from observer organizations.
Correcto. No habiendo comentarios.
As I see no further requests for the floor, the plenary takes note of the Secretary's report with the recommendations in paragraph 26 of document CoP19 Doc 18, which are to note the report and delete decision 18.38 on World Wildlife Day.
A continuación.
Now, we will consider the reports from Committee 1 and 2. I would like to invite the Chair of Committee 2 to introduce the recommendations of Committee 2 on administrative and financial matters.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to item 7.1, document CoP19 document 7.1 was noted. On item 7.2, report of the Executive Director of UNEP on administrative and other matters, document CoP19 Doc 7.2 was noted. On item 7.3, financial reports for 2020 to 2022, the report of expenditures incurred was accepted, and the reports of implementation of the costed programs of work for 2020, 2021, and 2022 up to 30 September 2022 were approved. On item 7.4, Budget and Work Programme for 2023 to 2025, the draft resolution on the Budget and Work Programme for 2023 to 2025 in document CoP19 COM2-4 with amendments reflected in summary record CoP19 COM2 Rec 16 was agreed by consensus.
Muchas gracias, presidente.
I thank you, Chair. We adopt the report on expenditures incurred in document 7.3 and reports of the implementation of costed programs of work for 2020-2021 up until the 30th of June 2022. They are adopted. And we take note of the documents COP19 7.1 as agreed by Committee 2, document 7.2 as agreed by Committee 2.
Pasamos entonces.
And so we will now move on to the next item on the Budget and Work Programme for 2023 to 2025. I now give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2 to present this.
Thank you, Chair. On item 7.4, Budget and Work Programme for 2023 to 2025, the draft resolution on the Budget and Work Programme for 2023 to 2025 in document COP19 COM2-4 14 with amendments reflected in summary record COP19 COM2 Rec 16 was agreed by consensus.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, Chair. I invite comments from parties. I invite comments from non-party states, intergovernmental organizations, and I also invite comments from observer organizations. There is no request for the floor. Thank you, Chair. The recommendations of Committee 2 are adopted. I thank the Chair of Committee 2. And we will now move on to the next item. Access to funding.
Thank you, Chair. On item 7.5, access to funding, the draft decisions on access to funding with the amendments as reflected in COP19 COM2 Rec 1 Rev 1 were accepted by consensus. It was also agreed to delete decisions 18.5 to 18.11.
Muchas gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Are there any interventions? The recommendations of Committee 1 of Committee 2 are adopted. Thank you to the Chair of Committee 2. Please continue with the next item on the Sponsored Delegates Project.
Thank you, Chair. On item 7.6, Sponsored Delegates Project, the amendments to Resolution COMP 17.3 on Sponsored Delegates Project and the draft decision on the same contained in document CoP19, Doc 7.6 were accepted by consensus. The committee agreed to retain decision 18.12.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Chair. Does any delegation wish to request the floor? The recommendations of Committee 2 are adopted. Thank you, Chair of Committee 2. Please continue with the next item.
Pasamos ahora a la...
We will now move on to strategic matters. And before we continue to consider the reports from Committee 1 and 2, I would like to invite representatives from the regions to share the outcomes of the regional meetings in terms of the regional and alternate regional representatives nominated to serve on the Standing Committee as well as on the Animals and Plants Committees for their respective regions. I will call on each region to present and will follow an alphabetical order. First, I invite Africa.
Portavoz es...
The spokesperson is Namibia.
The Africa Regional Group agreed on the following members to address the vacancies in the committees. First committee is the Standing Committee. Chad, Kenya, Madagascar will become members of the Standing Committee for the Africa region. The representatives for Africa on the Standing Committee will therefore be Chad, Kenya, Madagascar, and Morocco. The new alternate members of the Standing Committee for the Africa region will be the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the United Republic of Tanzania, and Zambia. The alternate members of the Standing Committee will therefore be the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Senegal, the United Republic of Tanzania, and Zambia. On the Animals Committee, Ms. Maha Gali from Cameroon was selected as member of the Animals Committee. The Animals Committee members for the Africa region will therefore be Mr. Pantaleon M.B. Kasoma from Uganda and Ms. Maha Gali from Cameroon. Dr. James Wakibara from the United Republic of Tanzania and Dr. Jebril Diok from Senegal were selected as alternate members of the Animals Committee. On the Plants Committee, Dr. Aurélie Flo Kaumba Pambo from Gabon was re-selected as member of the Plants Committee. Dr. Celestino Peter Balama from the United Republic of Tanzania was selected as member of the Plants Committee. The Plants Committee members for Africa will therefore be Dr. Aurélie Flo Kaumba Pambo from Gabon and Dr. Celestino Peter Balama from the United Republic of Tanzania. Professor Betty Jean Lagarde from Cameroon and Dr. Zandioj Ahwanet from Algeria were selected as alternate members of the Plants Committee. I submit, Mr. Chairperson.
Muchas.
I thank you, Namibia. On behalf of Africa, I now give the floor to Kuwait, representing the Asia region.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to represent the outcome of the Asia meeting and the nomination for each committee. So for the standing committee, there were 2 vacant for the member and 3 vacant for the alternate. So the members will be as follows. The new elected member is Japan, Kuwait, and Indonesia will continue their period. The new alternate member is China, Singapore, and India. And for the animal committee, there were 1 vacant, and it was filled by Dr. Amin Hamdi from Indonesia. For the plants committee, it was all vacant, with exception for the member from Indonesia. So the member for the plant committee was filled with Ms. Zhen Yan from China, and also a representative from Singapore, Dr. Chong Ki Yan, and also Ms. Somley Tongyi from Thailand. Thank you, Chair.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Kuwait, representing Asia. I now give the floor to Peru, who is the representative for Central and South America and the Caribbean.
Gracias. Sí,
Thank you. For the standing committee, we had 2 vacancies, and as titular members, it will be the Dominican Republic, and Brazil and Honduras will continue. And in terms of our alternate members, they will be Cuba, Nicaragua, and Ecuador. For the Plants Committee, we have the same members as titular members. Our representative from Argentina, and we have Costa Rica continuing, and the representative from Honduras. We have the nomenclature specialist who will continue, Mr. Peter Paul van Dijk. For the Plants Committee, we had 1 vacancy for the titular member, so we will continue to have Ms. Fabiola Rocio Núñez Nebra from Peru, and Mr. Augusto Belteton Chacon from Guatemala was re-elected, and we will have Chile as an alternate, Mr. Fernando Emilio Olave Ortiz, and for Cuba we have a representative, and the nomenclature specialist will continue to be Ms. Ronel Renet Klopper. Thank you. I thank you, Peru, representing Central and South America and the Caribbean. I now give the floor to Belgium, who will represent Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I want to present the outcome of the European Regional Meeting. For the Standing Committee, we had 2 open positions for permanent members, and they have been filled with the United Kingdom and Georgia. And we had 1 alternate member, and that will be filled by Israel. For the Plants Committee, we had 1 vacancy for an expert, and that will be filled with Nolene Smith from Ireland. And we had 1 vacancy as an alternate expert, and that will be filled with by Hugo de Boer from Norway. I thank you.
Gracias, Bélgica.
I thank Belgium for representing Europe, and now I give the floor to Canada, representing North America.
Thank you, Chair. For the North American region, for the Standing Committee, the member will be the United States of America, and the alternate will be Canada. For the Animals Committee, the member will be Ezequiel Benitez of Mexico, and our alternate member will be Rosemary Nam of the USA. And for the Plants Committee, The member for North America will be Cecilia Lougheed of Canada, and the alternate member will be Ezequiel Benitez of Mexico. Thank you, Chair.
Muchas gracias.
I thank Canada representing North America. I now give the floor to the speaker for Oceania from New Zealand.
Thank you, Chair. For the Oceania representatives on the Standing Committee, both the Standing Committee representative role and the alternate role become vacant. The region has agreed to New Zealand continuing to represent the region on the Standing Committee as representative and for Australia to continue as the alternate. For the Animals Committee, in Oceania, the Animals Committee representative role becomes vacant. The region has agreed that Dr. Hugh Robertson from New Zealand will continue as the Animals Committee representative. We thank Hugh for his ongoing commitment to CITES and his ongoing support to our region in this role. For the Plants Committee, the Oceania region thanks Mr. Marika Vuli Tuiwawa from Fiji for his contributions during his term as the Oceania alternate on the Plants Committee. His term has ended, and the region welcomes Mr. Himuli Liki Afu from Tonga as our new alternate on the Plants Committee. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Nueva Zelanda.
Thank you, New Zealand, representing Oceania. So now we call on the Conference of the Parties to consider the nominations of alternate regional representative to serve on the Standing Committee and Animals and Plants Committees for their respective regions. We have received nominations from all regions, and I am seeking agreement from the Conference of the Parties that these nominations are confirmed. Seeing no request for the floor, the nominations are confirmed. Brazil has requested the floor. Brazil, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Brazil receives this nomination to represent the Latin America and South America region in this committee. We would like to thank Peru for all the work carried out on behalf of our region. It's an important responsibility for us to replace them in the committee, and although the challenges are huge, we hope we'll be able to work very efficiently with the other members of the committee. To our friends from Central and Southern America and the Caribbean, we hope that we'll be able to do everything possible so that our visions are always present and we continue contributing to the implementation of the objectives of the committee. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you, Brazil. I now give the floor to Switzerland.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I speak as Chair of the Animals Committee, and the election of the nomenclature specialist, I think that the process-wise we have to do it a bit differently than it was proposed, because in terms of paragraph 5C of Annex 2, the terms of reference of the Animals and Plants Committees of the Conference of the Parties, to Resolution Conf 18.2 on the establishment of committees, the Animals Committee specialist on zoological nomenclature shall be elected by the Conference of the Parties, having been selected by the Animals Committee based on candidates nominated by parties. Paragraph 10b in Annex 2 provides further guidance regarding the nomination of candidates and indicates that in case of nomenclature specialists, the names and the curricula vitae of the proposed candidates shall be circulated to relevant committees. So following the notification to the parties 2022 and 026 seeking candidates for vacant posts, the Secretariat received one nomination for the vacant post of the specialist on zoological nomenclature. For the Animals Committee, this was from Canada, Mexico, and the United States of America, who proposed the re-election of Dr. Peter Paul van Dyck, whose CV was attached to that mail. The Animals Committee was consulted electronically and unanimously supported the candidature of Peter Paul van Dijk as nomenclature specialist for fauna in the Animals Committee. Thank you, Chair.
Gracias.
Thank you very much, Animals Committee. We take good note. Thank you for this information. The nominations are confirmed on the basis of the interventions made. As there are no objections, the nominations are confirmed.
Continuamos ahora con la...
We now continue with item 10, with the strategy issues, strategic matters considered by Committee 1 and Committee 2. I would like to invite the chairs of Committees 1 and 2 to introduce the recommendations of the committees on the strategic vision of CITES. I now give the floor to Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. On the CITES strategic vision, item 10, the draft decisions in document CoP19, document 10, and its addendum were accepted by consensus, as were the indicators presented in document CoP19, COM22. It was furthermore agreed to delete decisions 18.23 to 18.26.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, Chair. Would any delegation like to take the floor on this item?
Se adoptan las recomendaciones.
The recommendations of Committee 2 are therefore adopted. Thank you very much, Chair of Committee 2. The next item is the Appendix 1 listed species item, item 11. Chair of Committee 1, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. 2 draft decisions in Annex 1 of document CoP19, Doc 11, with amendments recorded in document CoP19, COM1, Rec 15, were agreed by consensus. It was also agreed to delete decisions 18.28 and 18.29, also by consensus. And Chair, if you'll just permit me an extra remark. Yesterday in my closing statement, I inadvertently neglected to include the rapporteurs in my long list of people to thank. So with my apologies to them, I would like to put my very warm thanks on the record. Thank you, Chair.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair of Committee 1. Would any delegation like to take the floor?
Entonces adopta.
The recommendations of Committee 1 are therefore adopted. Thank you very much.
Presidente del comité. No. Pasamos al punto siguiente. Informe.
Next item, World Wildlife Trade Report. Introduction by Chair of Committee 2. Chair of Committee 2, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The decisions on the World Wildlife Trade Report contained in document CoP19, COM21 were agreed by consensus.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you very much, Chair. Would any delegation like to take the floor?
Entonces se adoptan las.
Recommendations are therefore adopted. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Committee 2.
Vamos al siguiente punto.
We now move to item 13, engagement of Indigenous peoples and local communities. I now give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. Revised versions of decisions 17.57, Rev CoP19, 18.31, Rev CoP19, and 18.32, Rev CoP19 were accepted by consensus. A new draft decision was also accepted with the exception of the text "and international" in paragraph A of the new draft decision that was not accepted after a vote with 30 parties voting in favour, 48 against, and 14 abstentions.
Muchas gracias, Presidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. Would any delegation like to take the floor?
Se adoptan entonces.
The recommendations of Committee 2 are therefore adopted. Thank you very much, Chair.
Seguimos con.
We continue now with the next item, item 14, livelihoods. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. The committee agreed by consensus the revised decisions in document COP19 Doc 14 with a further amendment as reflected in COP19 COM2 Rec 5. The committee also agreed to delete decisions 18.36 and 18.37.
Muchas gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Would any delegation like to take the floor? The recommendations of Committee 2 are adopted. Thank you very much, Chair. We continue with item on livelihoods. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2.
Pasamos al punto 15, mecanismo de participación.
Item 15, participatory mechanisms for rural communities in CITES.
It was agreed that the proponents of document COP19, document 15, Rev 1, could refer the matters raised in the document to the intersessional working group to be established by the Standing Committee in terms of decisions adopted under Agenda Item 13 on engagement of Indigenous peoples and local communities.
Thank you, Chair. Would any party like to take the floor? The recommendations of Committee 2 are therefore adopted. Thank you, Chair. We now continue with item 16, capacity building. Chair of Committee 2, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The draft resolution on capacity building was accepted by consensus with amendments as contained in COP19 COM2 Rec 4 Rev 1. The draft decisions on capacity building in document COP19 document 16 were accepted, and it was agreed that decisions 18.39 to 18.46 be deleted.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, Chair. Would any delegation like to take the floor? There are no observations. We therefore approve the recommendations of Committee 2. We adopt the recommendations. We move on to the next item. Item 17, cooperation with organizations and multilateral environmental agreements. 17.1, item on cooperation with other biodiversity-related conventions. Chair of Committee 2, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Committee 2 accepted the draft decisions in document COP19 17.1 by consensus and agreed the deletion of decisions 18.47 and 18.48.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, Chair. Any comments from any party? There are no comments. We therefore adopt the recommendations of Committee 2. Thank you, Chair. We continue. Item 17.2, cooperation with the Global Strategy for Plant Conservation. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. Committee 2 accepted the draft decision in document COP19 Doc 17.2 with amendments referred to in CoP19 COM2 Rec 3 Rev 1, including draft decision 19BB, and agreed that decisions 18.49 to 18.51 be deleted.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, Chair. Any comments from the floor? There are no comments. The recommendations of Committee 2 are adopted. Thank you, Chair. We move on to item 17.3, cooperation with the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. The draft decisions contained in document CoP19 Doc 17.3 were accepted by consensus.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, Chair. Would any delegation like to take the floor? There are no requests for the floor. We therefore adopt the recommendations of Committee 2. Thank you, Chair. We now move on to item 17.4, the joint CITES CMS Africanivores Initiative. Introduction by the Chair of Committee 2. You have the floor.
Thank you. The existing, revised and new draft decisions contained in document CoP19 Doc 17.4 were accepted, and the deletion of decisions 18.56 to 18.58 was agreed.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. Would any delegation now like to take the floor? You have the floor. Doesn't seem to be the case. The recommendations of Committee 2 are adopted. We now continue with the next item in the agenda, the International Consortium to Fight Against Crimes Against Wildlife. I give the floor to Committee 2 Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Draft decisions contained in document CoP19 Doc 17.5 were accepted, and the deletion of decision 18.13 was agreed.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. The floor is open. Very well then, we adopt the recommendations of Committee 2. Next item, CITES and forests. I give the floor now to the Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. The draft decisions in document CoP19 COM2 11 were agreed by consensus.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. The floor is now open for comments. The recommendations of Committee 2 are therefore adopted. Thank you very much. The next item in the agenda is item 20, CITES Tree Species Programme. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 1. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. 2 draft decisions in Annex 1 to document CoP19 Doc 20, with amendments recorded in document CoP19 COM1 Rec 3 Rev 1, were agreed by consensus. The committee agreed to delete decisions 18.14 to 18.17, all by consensus. Thank you, Chair.
Gracias a usted.
Thank you, Chair. Any delegation would like to take the floor? Very well. We adopt the recommendations of Committee 1. Thank you very much, Chair. The next item in the agenda is the item 21, the review of the CITES program. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. The amendments to Resolution Conf 10.10, Rev Cop 18, on trade in elephant specimens, and its annex, with the proposed amendments as recorded in CoP19 COM2 Rec 7 Rev 1, were agreed by consensus. The amendments to Resolution Conf 11.17 Rev Cop 18 on national reports and the prioritisation of recommendations of the review were also agreed by consensus. The committee furthermore accepted draft decisions on the development of clear criteria for the categorization of parties, the implementation of the priority recommendations from the review of the CITES program, the deletion of decisions 18.18 to 18.20 were also agreed.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Chair of Committee 2, the floor is now open for comments. Recommendations are therefore adopted. Thank you. We now move on to item 22, Mike and ETIS programs. I give the floor to Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. The committee accepted the draft decisions in document CoP19 Doc 22 with amendments as recorded in document CoP19 COM2 Rec 7 Rev 1. It was also agreed to delete decisions 18.21 and 18.22.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta. ¿Alguna delegación quiere?
Thank you, Chair. Any delegation would like to take the floor? Seeing none, the recommendations of Committee 2 are adopted. Thank you, Chair.
El siguiente punto.
Moving on, item 23, role of CITES in reducing risk of future zoonotic disease emergence associated with international wildlife trade. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. Documents COP19 Doc 23.1 and 23.2 were considered together. The draft decisions in document COP19 COM2 6 with amendments were agreed by consensus.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, Chair. Would any delegation like to take the floor now? Seeing none, the recommendations of Committee 2 are adopted. Thank you.
Siguiente punto implica.
Next item in the agenda, 24, implications of the COVID-19 pandemic on the implementation of the Convention. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. The draft decisions in Annex 1 to document COP19 Doc 24 as amended by the United States of America were accepted by consensus.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you very much, Chair of Committee 2. Would any delegation like to take the floor now? Seeing none, the recommendations of Committee 2 are adopted. Thank you very much. Item 25, Action Plan on Gender-Related Matters. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. The draft resolution and decisions in document COP19 COM2 3 were agreed after a secret ballot.
Gracias, Presidenta. ¿Alguna delegación?
Thank you, Chair. The floor is open. No comments. We therefore adopt the recommendations of Committee 2. We now move to the item on interpretation and implementation matters. To continue to consider the review of resolutions, I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. I regret that Committee 2 was unable to consider this matter, so there is no recommendation from Committee 2 on this matter.
Punto queda pendiente para la discusión.
The item is suspended. I give the floor to the Secretariat.
As part of this regular work under Resolution CON 4.6 and arising from correspondence from parties and organizations, the Secretariat has become aware of a variety of problems of interpretation and implementation of the resolutions. These have been brought to the Standing Committee during the intersessional period for comments by parties. As a result, the Secretariat is now proposing several amendments to resolution. A quick overview, Annex 1 on Resolution CON 4.6 proposes amendments related to the inclusion of new trade term codes in the guidelines for annual reports and provisions for the update of the guidance for the publication of the appendices. Annexes 2 and 7 on Resolution Conf 11.3 and Conf 17.4 propose replacing illegal online trade by wildlife crime linked to the Internet as per Decision 18.184. Annex 3 on Resolution Conf 11.17 also proposes amendments related to the inclusion of new trade term codes in the guidelines for annual report and about the deadline for submission for implementation reports. Annexes 4 and 5 on Resolution Conf 12.3 and 14.3 propose replacing the term biannual report by implementation report. And finally, Annex 6 on Resolution Conf 14.8 proposes adding text saying that no periodic review of any great whale, including the fin whale, should occur while the moratorium by the International Whaling Commission is in place. And in essence, what we are proposing is incorporating Decision 14.81 that has been valid since COP14 in the periodic review resolution. Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair.
Gracias, secretaria.
Thank you, Chair. I now invite the Conference of the Parties to adopt the amendments in all of the annexes of the document. If the modification of Resolution Conf 14.8 Rev COP17, we invite the Conference of the Parties to remove in consequence Decision 14.81. I give the floor to Japan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Japan very much appreciates the work by the Secretariat and accepts all of the amendments except for Annex 2 to COP19 Doc 26. Japan doesn't see reasonable justification to the proposed amendment in Annex 6, which proposes verbatim inclusion of Decision 14.81 in the resolution Conf 14.8 Rev COP17 about the temporal suspension of periodic review of any great whale while the so-called moratorium is in place at the International Whaling Commission. The decision 14.81 was actually a counter-proposal to Japan's decision proposal at COP14 in Hague that called for the update of Resolution Conf 11.4 Rev COP12 based on the advice from the Scientific Committee of IWC. Given this background, Chair, Japan is of the view that Decision 14.81 be maintained as it stands and not included in the resolution. First, Decision 40.81 lacks scientific grounds because the so-called moratorium itself was adopted without science, while we recognize different views on it. Second, suspending the periodic review is a temporal decision for activities in CITES, and it is not appropriate, in our view, to adopt this as part of resolution. And most importantly, Chair, the adoption of the amendment in Annex 6 means that CITES resolution will be destined to be influenced by the decision by outside CITES, not by CITES parties. Therefore, Japan thinks the proposed amendment in Annex 6 should not be concluded based on pros and cons expressed by parties. Instead, we should simply avoid making this amendment. Chair, this is about the integrity of resolution. Japan urges the Secretariat and all parties to seriously consider the consequences of this proposed amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gracias, Japón.
Thank you, Japan. We have taken note. I now give the floor to Australia.
Thank you, Chair. Australia thanks the work of the Secretariat for their work on this item.
With reference to the Secretariat's proposal to incorporate Decision 14.81 on Great Whales into Resolution Conf 14.8, Rev CoP19 on periodic review of species included in Appendices 1 and 2, Australia's priority is to ensure the International Whaling Commission is the global authority for decisions regarding commercial whaling. Australia proposed Decision 14.81 at COP14 in 2007 and has supported the ongoing maintenance of this decision since this time. Australia can support the incorporation of the effect of Decision 14.81 into Resolution 14.8 Rev COP17 as proposed by the Secretariat, which we note with gratitude has the equivalent language, intent and effect of Decision 14.81. Should the COP agree to the proposal of the Secretariat on this matter, Australia would also support the deletion of Decision 14.81. Thank you, Chair.
Gracias, Argentina.
I thank you, and I now give the floor to Argentina.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. Argentina, in addition to Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Cuba, Ecuador, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Panama, the Dominican Republic, and Uruguay would like to express their agreement with the amendment proposed in Annex 5, given that the moratorium remains in place. When it comes to great whales, it is the International Whaling Commission that should be involved. Thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra la
Thank you. I now give the floor to the European Union.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the EU and its member states. We would like to thank to the CITES Secretariat for the preparation of the document on the review of resolutions and decisions. We support proposed changes in the resolutions as they will contribute to better interpretation and implementation of the Convention. If the relevant change to Resolution Conf 14.8 Rev COP 17 is adopted, we can also support the deletion of Decision 1481. Finally, we would like to note that possible changes to Resolution Conf 11.3 Rev COP 18 have already been also discussed under other agenda items during the present meeting, and that changes should be consolidated by the Secretariat into one single document prior to their adoption, so that coherence of the proposed changes is ensured. Thank you, Chair.
Gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to Israel.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, we would like to echo our support as expressed by Australia, the European Union, and Argentina in the name of a long list of countries supporting the Secretariat's proposal for a way forward on Annex 6. I think Argentina mentioned Annex 5 in their intervention, but I assume they meant Annex 6 because they were speaking about the International Whaling Commission, which is mentioned in Annex 6 and not Annex 5. So we would lend our support also to this interventions by the previous parties. Thank you.
Gracias, Israel.
Thank you, Israel. I now give the floor to New Zealand.
Thank you, Chair. New Zealand would like to add its voice to Australia, Argentina and the EU and Israel as well. We support their approach. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you, New Zealand.
Muchas gracias a todos los.
I'd like to thank all those who have spoken. I see we do not have consensus on Japan's proposal, so we're going to give the floor to Japan so they can decide on the way forward that they would like to see.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Japan indicated, we do not think this is a matter of the pros and cons. This is rather about the integrity of the resolution. I would like to repeat my point. The adoption of the amendment in Annex 6 means that the CITES resolution will be destined to be influenced by outside CITES, not by CITES parties. I haven't heard any opinion on this point, but at least I'd like to seek the views of the Secretariat on this point. We do not want to make these things more difficult, but we just want to discuss on this point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Le damos la palabra.
We give the floor to the Secretariat. Secretariat has the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And just first to clarify, the text we are discussing in Spanish is in Annex 5 and in English is in Annex 6. So that's why you are hearing different annexes, but it's the same text. We were discussing here internally, and the text already exists in the decisions, and we would like to avoid spending a lot of time in this plenary about this issue. So if it's the wish of the plenary to maintain the text in the decision 14.81, the effect is similar to moving this to the resolution that has a more permanent nature. So to avoid a long discussion on this and to have more time to prepare a more informed advice for the parties and the committees and the plenary, we would suggest to maintain the text in the decision and to drop the recommendation to add this to the resolution 14.8. Thank you, Chair.
Para cuestión de orden.
For a point of order, Israel has requested the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm making a point of order because according to Rule 21.1, it says specifically that there should be no further discussion on recommendations that come out of the committees unless there has been an official motion to reopen the discussion. It says specifically in Rule 21.1 that it should immediately be decided. I see no motion to reopen the debate here. I see no motion of that nature, and yet discussion of this suggestion by the Secretariat is now being carried out. So either we have a motion to open debate or we should go immediately to vote on specifically the issue at hand. So at this point, we would request that the chair takes the matter as it was suggested by Committee 2. There was full support from the floor here for that motion, and continue unless there is a motion to reopen debate. Thank you.
Gracias. Israel tiene la...
Thank you, Israel. I give the floor to the Secretariat.
Thank you very much, Chair. Unfortunately, this is one of the items that was not discussed in Committee 2 because the time constraint. So we are discussing this item in the plenary for the first time now. So we are not reopening a debate. We are just discussing on the substance of the recommendations, and these are the different views that you have expressed now. So the motion of reopening the debate doesn't proceed in this case. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Gracias a todos.
Thank you, everyone. We see that we have two options as chair of the plenary. to adopt the new proposal that has been set out or not adopt it and continue with the resolution as already set out. So we open the floor for parties, and I give the floor to Switzerland.
Thank you, Chair. I'm making this intervention as Chair of the Animals Committee, not as Switzerland. I would like to second what the Secretariat said. To the work of the Animals Committee in relation to this resolution, it makes no difference where the instruction to the Animals Committee to not include the great whale in the periodic review is placed, whether it's placed in a decision or as part of a resolution. Furthermore, wherever it is located, it does not affect the rights or ability of parties to carry out reviews of species in the appendices and act on the outcomes of such reviews as they deem necessary. So a party can still submit the proposal to the COP as it wishes to do so, just without the review by the Animals Committee and endorsement of the Animals Committee. Thank you, Chair.
Gracias, Presidente.
I thank the chair of the Animals Committee, and I give the floor to the European Union.
Thank you, Chair. As we have said in our previous intervention, we support the proposed changes in the resolution 14.8 as included in Annex 6 in the English version of document CoP19-26. We do not agree with the arguments from Japan. I think the language as included in Annex 6 is an agreement of the CITES parties. So we would support keeping the recommendations of the document of the Secretariat as they are. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Unión Europea.
I thank the European Union. I give the floor to Australia, to be followed by Mali.
Thank you, Chair. Australia supports the intervention by the European Union on this matter.
Gracias, Australia.
Thank you, Australia. I give the floor to Mali, to be followed by the United Kingdom, and then we will close Argentina, and then we will close the list. So, first of all, Mali.
Mali tiene la palabra.
Mali, you have the floor.
Si, ça sort. Alors, donc.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I wanted to take the floor to present our concerns. There are countries that have spoken before us, in particular Israel, Argentina, and Australia. And on behalf of our coalition, Madam, we also wish to take the floor on hearing the proposal made by Japan, and we agree once more that we are in favor of the original document. Thank you.
Thank you, Mali. United Kingdom tiene la palabra.
UK, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We'd like to align with the comments of Australia, the European Union and others. We consider the proposals made in document 26 to amend existing resolutions to be an appropriate way forward, and therefore we support adoption of this proposal, including and in particular the inclusion of the text of decision 14.81 in Res Comp 14.8 Rev COP 17. Thank you, Chair.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Gracias,
Thank you, UK. Indonesia, is it a point of order?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We would like to, I guess, provide our opinion that since this issue is not yet discussed in the committee, we would like to hear more on the views of the parties in this regard, including from Japan. If perhaps Japan could elaborate further on their discussion. I mean, we don't want to close this discussion just now, if possible, Madam Chair, because we need to understand better on each other's position, if possible. Thank you, Madam Chair, for your kind consideration.
Gracias, Indonesia.
Thank you, Indonesia. As I said, after Argentina has spoken, we will give the floor once more to Japan. But I've said we have two decisions to remain with what there was before or to work with the amendment that was established. Argentina, please. Thank you very much. We would like to repeat, and we've already expressed our position. We agree with the European Union and Australia. Thank you.
Gracias, Argentina.
Thank you, Argentina. I will give the floor once more to Japan. From what I am seeing in the plenary, there is not a great deal of consensus. So we'll give the floor to Japan to explain the point once more and to inform us of how they wish to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. and Madam Chair. Our point is that the difference between the implication of the difference between the resolution and decision. We think that the decision is a plan, kind of a plan of the CITES activities, but CITES resolution is a collective will of the parties. In this regard, there is a different implications from the two. That is a point that we want to discuss. We wanted to discuss on the floor, but unfortunately, we couldn't have the discussion on this particular point. In this regard, I would like to thank Indonesia to ask for the clarification on the point. But at the same time, we don't like to prolong the discussion. So if the majority would like to make it in the resolution, Japan will not oppose on this point. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Gracias, Japón.
Thank you, Japan. As we saw in the plenary, the majority in favor of the adoption of the new amendment. So we adopt it and move on to the next item.
Le damos la palabra a la secretaria.
We will give the floor to the Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. The document in front of you contains a report of a Secretariat on those decisions that were not considered in a separate agenda item for this Conference of the Parties. You will find an update on really a wide variety of different work, be it cooperation with aquabats, traceability, precious corals, leopards, African grey parrots, Titicaca water frogs. So it's a list of different decisions that were not really discussed in Committee 1 and Committee 2. And for each decision, the Secretariat is providing a little bit of an update on the work that has been done so far. And based on that update is proposing either deletion of the decisions or a renewal so that the work can be completed. The Secretariat would like to draw the party's attention to paragraph 6 of the document, saying that the Secretariat does not intend to include in the list of decisions in effect after COP19 any of the decisions adopted at previous conferences of the parties that are not agreed for continuation either in an existing or amended form at the present meeting. In short, I think both Committee 1 and Committee 2 chairs have been very disciplined in trying to delete the old decisions when new ones were adopted, but just in case some of them slip through and we have new draft decisions, then the intention is not to keep the old one. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Gracias, Secretaria.
I thank the Secretariat, and we will look at the recommendations of the Secretariat once more. It should be noted that in implementing paragraph 4B of Resolution Conf 4.6 Rev CoP17, the Secretariat does not intend to include in the list of decisions in effect after CoP19 any of the decisions adopted at previous conferences of the parties that are not agreed for continuation either in an existing or amended form at the present meeting. Next, the Conference of the Parties is invited to decide on the appropriate action to take in relation to the decisions listed in Annex 1 to the present document.
¿Alguien tiene alguna observación?
Are there any requests for the floor?
Tiene la palabra.
I give the floor to the USA.
Thank you, Chair. While we support the Secretariat noting in its comments on COP19 documents where the CITES committees have not systematically proposed deletion of the COP18 decisions, new draft decisions are meant to replace, we oppose the Secretariat's intention not to include the list of decisions in effect after COP19. After COP19, any of the decisions adopted at previous meetings of the Conference of the Parties that are not agreed. We believe that the decision to delete a decision is an active determination of the Conference of the Parties and not merely a housekeeping exercise. With regard to the other recommendations in the document, we support adoption of the Secretariat's recommendations with a few exceptions. For decisions 17.18 Rev COP18 through 17.110 Rev COP18 concerning the review of significant trade, we recommend renewal of this suite of decisions by amending them to reflect COP19. While the Secretariat plans to unveil the database today, that database is not yet complete and has yet to be tested and unveiled to parties as called for in Decision 17.18. We have not as yet seen a training module or user guide as called for in 17.109 and 17.110, and we strongly recommend retention of the timeframes built into the decisions and also emphasize the need for renewed and close collaboration with the Technical Advisory Group to inform next steps. With regard to Decision 18.209 concerning the humphead wrasse, the Secretariat notes that it has not received any funding to implement this decision, and should funding become available in the future, it can implement it under Article 12 of the Convention. However, we note that the Conference of the Parties adopts decisions to encourage external funding and help prioritize the Secretariat's work. Therefore, we do not support deletion of this decision. With regard to decisions 17.256 Rev COP18 and 17.258 Rev COP18 concerning African gray parrots, we do not support the Secretariat's recommendation to delete Decision 17.256, and we believe that it should be retained without amendment. According to the Secretariat, since Decision 17.256 was agreed in 2016, it has not received any requests for assistance concerning the development and updating of national action plans for Cyticus erythicus. However, given the ongoing illegal trade in this species, we strongly recommend that African gray parrot range states conduct scientifically based surveys to capture both baseline population as well as trends. Finally, we support the Secretariat's recommendation to delete 17.258 as the timeframe specified in the decision ends at COP19. And we concur with the Secretariat's assumption that facilities wishing to be registered following the inclusion of the species in Appendix 1 have likely now been accomplished, and therefore there is no further need to retain the special conditions included in this decision. Thank you, Chair.
Gracias, Estados Unidos.
Thank you, United States. I now give the floor to the European Union.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the EU and its member states. We would like to thank the Secretariat for the submitted review of decisions. We support the suggestions made by the Secretariat in the list of decisions to be retained or deleted as specified in the Annex 1 of the document 27 with one single amendment. We would prefer decision 1855 on cooperation on the Black Sea bottlenose dolphin not to be deleted as its implementation is still pending. Thank you, Chair.
Gracias.
I thank you. I give the floor to Sri Lanka.
Thank you, Chair. This intervention is in relation to decision of the Secretariat 18.175 directed to the Animal Committee regarding captive breeding of Sri Lankan agamids, and we certainly support its retention. At COP18 in Geneva, Sri Lanka, with the support of parties, listed several endemic agamids into CITES appendices. As per decision 18.175, the Animal Committee has been requested to review the report produced by WCMC submitted to its 31st meeting in respect of possible species-country combinations for 3 agamid species under Resolution Conf 17.7 Rev COP 18 on review of trade in animal specimens reported as produced in captivity. Chair, we wish to make several points clear to this meeting, and we kindly ask you to allow me to do so. Firstly, export of live or dead native fauna, including those species listed in CITES appendices, is regulated under Sri Lanka's Fauna and Flora Protection Ordinance. Under this legislation, trade in all Sri Lankan reptile species has been strictly prohibited for the last 29 years. However, we have no record of legal export for commercial purposes of these species having ever taken place. Furthermore, the last time permits were issued for the legal non-commercial export of reptiles from Sri Lanka was in 1980s, and this was only for zoos and for scientific research. However, we find multitude of our precious reptiles in commercial trade today. We therefore strongly refute claims by breeders as reported in the WCMC report that legal imports occurred in large numbers into certain countries. We also highlight that the report notes that at least 2 of the 3 species are difficult to breed and maintain in captivity. This casts further doubt on the legal origin of the numbers seen in the trade over the past decade. Colleagues, the answer to this question is simple. These species have been illegally trafficked in violation of our national laws. Hence, it is prudent to examine the ways and means by which these species were sourced when we discuss trade from captively bred sources. Chair, Sri Lanka requests that record notes our concerns, and we look forward to picking up the discussion on this at the 32nd Animals Committee meeting and resolve this issue once and for all. Thank you, Chair.
Sobre la base de las
On the basis of the interventions, the Conference of the Parties adopts their decisions with the amendments made by the United States, the European Union, and takes note of the intervention made by Sri Lanka. Thank you.
Seguimos entonces.
We now move on to the next item, which is interpretation and implementation matters. We give the floor to the chair of Committee 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. On item 28, national laws for the implementation of the Convention. The draft decisions on national laws for implementation of the Convention in document CoP19 Doc 28 as amended were agreed by consensus, with the amendments reflected in summary record CoP19 Com2 Rec 9 Rev 1. The deletion of decisions 18.62 to 18.67 were also agreed.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta del Comité 2.
Thank you, Chair of Committee 2. The floor is now open for delegations. Tanzania, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for giving us the opportunity. Chair, the United Republic of Tanzania does not intend to reopen the discussion on this agenda item. However, Chair, we kindly request to get feedback from the Secretariat regarding the request that was submitted during the discussion of this agenda item in Committee 2. Chair, we had requested that our national legislation be placed in Category 1 under the condition that once approved by this Conference of Parties and come into effect, the new CITES appendices for the United Republic of Tanzania will be published in the Government Gazette. Chair, currently we don't see any reason for us to publish these old CITES appendices, which in fact are expiring after this COP. Thank you, Chair.
Gracias. Tomamos.
Thank you very much. We take good note of your comments. The recommendations of Committee 2 are therefore adopted. Thank you very much, Chair. We now move to the next item on compliance matters. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. On item 29.1, implementation of Article 13 and Resolution COM 14.3, Rev COP 18, on CITES compliance procedures. The committee noted the information provided in document CoP19, Doc 29.1.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Chair. The floor is now open for comments. Doesn't seem to be the case. The recommendations are therefore adopted. Recommendations of Committee 2. We now move on to the next item. Totoaba, report of the Secretariat.
Perdón, tiene la palabra la presidenta.
I'm sorry, I give the floor to Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. The two documents under this agenda item were considered together. The decisions in document CoP19 Doc 29.2.1 as amended by the Secretariat and further amended in document CoP19 Com2.5 were agreed by consensus.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. Are there any requests for the floor? The recommendations of Committee 2 are therefore adopted. Thank you, Chair. We continue with item on Malagasy ebonies, palisanders and rosewoods. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. The draft decisions on Malagasy ebonies, Diospyros species, and palisanders and rosewoods, Dalbergia species, in document CoP19 Doc 29.3, as amended, were agreed by consensus.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, Chair. Would anybody like to take the floor on this item? Seeing none, the recommendations of Committee 2 are adopted. Thank you, Chair. We move on to the Compliance Assistant Programme, item 30. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. The proposed amendments to Resolution CONF 14.3, Rev COP 18, on CITES compliance procedures in document COP19 Doc 30 were accepted by consensus, as were the draft decisions. It was agreed to delete decisions 18.68, 18.69 and 18.70.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, Chair. Would any delegation like to take the floor? Seeing none, the recommendations of Committee 2 are adopted. Thank you very much, Chair. We now move to item 31, country-wide significant trade reviews. I give the floor to Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. The draft decisions in document COP19 Doc 31 were accepted by consensus, and it was agreed to delete decisions 18.71 to 18.73.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, Chair. Would any delegation like to take the floor? Seeing no, the recommendations of Committee 2 are adopted. We move on to the next item, review of Resolution CONF 11.3 on Rev COP 18 on compliance and enforcement. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. The proposed amendments to Resolution CONF 11.3, Rev COP 18 on compliance and enforcement in document COP19 Doc 32 were agreed, with amendments as recorded in document COP19 COM2 Rec 10. The draft decision in the document and the deletion of decision 18.74 were also agreed.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, Chair. Would any delegation like to take the floor? Seeing none, the recommendations of Committee 2 are adopted. Thank you very much, Chair. We move on to item 33, enforcement matters. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. The draft decisions on enforcement, as well as the amendments to Resolution CONF 17.6 on prohibiting, preventing, detecting and countering corruption, which facilitates activities conducted in violation of the Convention, document COP19, Doc 33 were agreed by consensus. The deletion of decisions 18.77 and 18.78 were also agreed.
Gracias.
Thank you, Chair. I now open the floor. Any comments? Seeing none, the recommendations of Committee 2 are adopted. Thank you very much, Chair. We move on to the next item, annual illegal trade reports. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. The amendment to Resolution CONF 11.17, Rev COP 18 on national reports and the draft decisions on the same were agreed, as recorded in COP19 COM2 Rec 14. The deletion of decisions 18.75 and 18.76 was agreed.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you very much, Chair. Would any delegation like to take the floor now? No. Okay. The recommendations of Committee 2 are therefore adopted. We move on to the next item, item 35, on the task force on illegal trade and specimens of CITES listed tree species. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. The committee agreed to the draft decisions in document COP19 Doc 35, with amendments recorded in COP19 COM2 Rec 14. It was also agreed to delete decisions 18.79 and 18.80.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, Chair. I now open the floor. Would any delegation like to take the floor? No. Very well. Recommendations of Committee 2 are adopted. Next item, it's item 36, so wildlife crime enforcement supporting West and Central Africa. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. The two documents relating to this agenda item were considered together. Draft decisions in document COP19 COM2 13 with minor amendments recorded in COP19 COM2 Rec 16 were agreed by consensus.
Gracias, presidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. Would any delegation like to take the floor on the two items? Very well. The recommendations of Committee 2 are therefore adopted. The next item is item 37, wildlife crime linked to the Internet. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. Amendments to Resolution Conf 11.3, Rev CoP 18 on compliance and enforcement in document CoP19 Doc 37 were accepted with an amendment relating to consistency in language. The draft decisions in document CoP19 Doc 37 were accepted with amendments recorded in CoP19 Com2 Rec 10. It was agreed to delete decisions 18.81 to 18.85.
Gracias, presidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. I open the floor for any comments. Seeing none, the recommendations of Committee 2 are adopted. Item 38, demand reduction to combat illegal trade. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. The committee agreed to amendments to Resolution Conf 17.4 on demand reduction strategies to combat illegal trade in CITES listed species with amendments recorded in CoP19 Com2 Rec 14. Draft decisions with amendments reflected in CoP19 Com2 Rec 14 were agreed, as well as the deletion of decisions 18.86 and 18.87.
Gracias.
Thank you, Chair. Would I now open the floor for comments? Seeing none, the recommendations of Committee 2 are adopted. Next item is item 39, domestic martyrs for frequently illegally traded specimens. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. Draft revised amendments to Resolution Conf 11.3 Rev CoP 18 in document CoP19 Doc 39 were agreed as reflected in CoP19 Com2 Rec 13. Draft decisions with amendments recorded in CoP19 Com2 Rec 13 were accepted, as was the deletion of decisions 17.87 and 17.88.
Gracias.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair of Committee 2. I now open the floor for comments. Seeing none, the recommendations of Committee 2 are adopted. Thank you very much. We now move on to matters relating to regulation of trade. I invite the chairs to continue sharing the recommendations emanating from the committees with the Conference of the Parties. And I give the floor to Chair of Committee 2 on item 40, guidance for making legal acquisition findings.
Thank you, Chair. An amendment to Resolution Conf 18.7 on legal acquisition findings to include the revised and amended rapid guide for the making of legal acquisition findings as an annex to the resolution was agreed by consensus. Draft decisions were agreed as reflected in CoP19 Com2 Rec 13 and the deletion of decisions 18.122 to 18.124 was accepted.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, Chair. Would any delegation now like to take the floor? Very well. The recommendations of Committee 2 are therefore adopted.
El siguiente.
Next item, item 41, electronic systems and information technologies and authentication and control of permits. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. Amendments to Resolution Conf 12.3, Rev CoP 18 on permits and certificates, and to Resolution Conf 11.3, Rev CoP 18 on compliance and enforcement were agreed, with amendments recorded in CoP19 Com2 Rec 14 and CoP19 Com2 Rec 15. It was also agreed to delete decisions 18.125 to 18.128 and 18.130 to 18.131.
Gracias, Presidente.
Very well, Chair. I now open the floor for comments. Seeing none, the recommendations of Committee 2 are adopted. Next item, item 43, non-detriment findings. 43.1, report of the Animals and Plants Committees. Chair of Committee 1, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. 3 draft decisions contained in document CoP19 COM1 Rec 15 were agreed by consensus. It was also agreed by consensus to delete decisions 18.132 to 18.134. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you, Chair of Committee 1. I open the floor for any comments. Seeing none, the recommendations of Committee 1 are adopted.
Por razones técnicas nos
For technical reasons, we skipped item 42 on the purpose codes on CITES permits and certificates. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2 on this item.
Thank you, Chair. The committee agreed by consensus on amendments to Resolution Conf 12.3 Rev COP 18 on permits and certificates, Resolution Conf 510 Rev COP 15 on definition of primarily commercial purposes, Resolution Conf 18.7 on legal acquisition findings, as well as revised amendments to Resolution Conf 17.8 on disposal of illegally traded and confiscated specimens of CITES listed species. Draft decisions on purpose of transaction codes with amendments recorded in COP19 COM2 Rec 13 were also agreed by consensus. The deletion of decision 14.54 Rev COP 18 was accepted.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, Chair of Committee 2. I open the floor for comments. The recommendations of Committee 2 are adopted. We continue now with non-detriment findings for specimens of Appendix 2 species taken in the marine environment not under jurisdiction of any state. Item 43.2, we continue. Chair of Committee 1, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. 5 draft decisions in the comments of the Secretariat of document COP19 Doc 43.2 were agreed by consensus. Thank you.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, Chair. I now open the floor for comments. Would any delegation like to take the floor? Very well, the recommendations of Committee 1 are adopted. The next item in the agenda is item 44, identification materials, review of resolution Conf 11.19, Rev COP 16. I give the floor to Chair of Committee 1.
Thank you, Chair. A draft resolution on materials for the identification of specimens of CITES listed species in Annex 1 and 3 draft decisions in Annex 2 of document COP19 Doc 44.1 with amendments recorded in document COP19 COM1 Rec 15 were agreed by consensus. Thank you.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, Chair. I now open the floor for comments. Seeing none, the recommendations of Committee 1 are adopted. Next item, identification materials. Review of Resolution CONF 11.19. Sorry, I apologize to the Chair. The next item is identification of timber and other wood products. Item 44.2. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 1.
Thank you, Chair. Draft decisions recorded in document CoP19, COM1, Rec 15, and the deletion of decisions 18.140 to 18.143 and decision 16.58, Rev COP18, were agreed by consensus. Thank you.
Gracias,
Thank you, Chair. I now open the floor for comments. Seeing none, the recommendations of Committee 1 are adopted. Next item is item 45, labeled System for Trading Caviar. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. The committee agreed to the draft decisions in COP19 document 45 with amendments recorded in COP19 COM2 Rec 14.
Gracias, Presidente. ¿Alguna delegación?
Thank you, Chair. I now open the floor for comments. Seeing none, the recommendations of Committee 2 are adopted. Next item, trade in stony corals. Item 46. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 1.
Thank you, Chair. 2 draft decisions contained in document COP19, COM1, Rec 15 were agreed by consensus. Thank you.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Would any delegation like to take the floor now? The recommendations of Committee 1 are therefore adopted. Next item is specimens produced through biotechnology. Item 47. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. The amendments to Resolution CONF 9.6, Rev COP 16 on trade in readily recognisable parts and derivatives in document COP19 Doc 47 were agreed by consensus. The amended draft decisions in COP19 COM2 document 10 were agreed, and the deletion of decision 18.147 to 18.150 was accepted.
Gracias.
Thank you, Chair. I now open the floor for comments. The recommendations of Committee 2 are therefore adopted. We move on to the next item, definition of the term appropriate and acceptable destinations. Item 48. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. The committee accepted the 2 non-binding guidance documents in document COP19 Doc 48 and the amended draft decisions as recorded in COP19 COM2 Rec 7 Rev 1. The deletion of decisions 18.152 to 18.156 was accepted.
Gracias.
Thank you, Chair. I now open the floor for comments. Seeing none, the recommendations of Committee 2 are therefore adopted. Next item, item 49, introduction from the sea. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. The draft decisions in document COP19 Doc 49 with amendments recorded in COP19 COM2 Rec 12 were agreed by consensus. The deletion of decisions 17.181, 18.157 and 18.158 was accepted.
Gracias.
Thank you, Chair of Committee 2. I now open the floor for comments. Seeing none, the recommendations of Committee 2 are adopted.
Siguiente punto, disposición.
Item 50, disposal of confiscated specimens. I give the floor to the Chair of Committee 2.
Thank you, Chair. The draft decisions in document COP19 Doc 50 with amendments recorded in COP19, COM2, Rec 15 were agreed by consensus. The deletion of decisions 18.159 to 18.164 was accepted.
Muchas gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, Chair. I now open the floor for comments. Seeing none, the recommendations of Committee 2 are adopted. We will adjourn now and start again at 2 p.m. Thank you very much.
Anuncio para los estudiantes.
Brief announcement for the Baeza community students. Miss Margarita Clemente, are you in the room with all your disciples? We would like to take a photograph. This is our traditional photograph.
Acérquense al podium, por favor.
Please, could you come to the podium?